All right, we have very little time, and I will respect your time today because the passage is short, so I get a pass. We're going to very, very quickly go through last week's message to make sure that we understand where we are building in the story of Yeshua, and then we get to the new stuff. It's lickety-split. We saw this Mark sandwich yesterday, last week. We saw the story interrupted, and then that same first story concluded, what we call the Mark sandwich. We saw Yeshua crossed over to the other side in Capernaum. We saw the first slice of bread was when this guy, leader of this big shot from the synagogue, Jairus, came and asked him, will you please come to my house post haste? My little daughter is at the point of death. It doesn't get any more dramatic than this. I think the language is very, very dynamic. She's at the point of death. In other words, there's no time to lose. Walk this way and don't spare the horses, because I know that you will, if you come, she will be healed. And this great crowd came to see him. They were pressing in on him. We get to the filling of the sandwich, and this woman with a hemorrhage for 12 years, and it specifies 12 years for a reason, which we know now, having heard the message already. This woman who could not get healed by any doctor, she figures, well, this guy is so awesome. She's just like Yair. She understands that this individual, this rabbi, this teacher, has so much authority, so much power inherent to him that just as the synagogue official believes that all Jesus needs to do is lay his hand on the daughter and she'll be healed, this hemorrhaging woman, she doesn't want to ask him to touch her because he would be unclean. So she will touch him, but not even him. She will just touch the tassel on the corner of his garment, and that will be sufficient. She will get well. That little talus there. And indeed, that's what happened. Her hemorrhage dries up. She's healed that moment from the affliction. And Jesus says, stop. Who touched me? Because he felt power coming out from him. Remember, he's a never-ending power source, so he's not draining, but it's just flowing from him. And he looks at the woman and he says, why did you touch me? Right? And she fesses up and she says the whole truth. In that verse, the whole truth, the truth, nothing but the truth. And he says to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. Now, one thing I neglected to share last week, and I think it's probably worth saying, although I assume it, but I shouldn't assume in this day and age. It is, understand what Jesus said in context. It is not her faith that healed her. It is that her faith led her to the position of seeking out Yeshua, Jesus. So, in other words, I don't want anybody to misconstrue that if you pray and you don't get well, that your faith is somehow deficient. This is a very specific instance where Yeshua was literally on the scene, right? And she literally approached him and touched him. Therefore, that act of faith is what caused her to be healed through his power. It's his power that healed her. So again, do not think that I'm praying, and there's no breakthrough. My faith, I must not believe enough. That's not true. This is a very specific instance. But having said that, that's the filling of the sandwich. We get back to the second piece of bread, right? Remember? And by this point, the journey of Yeshua from the port to the city proper, the town proper, where the synagogue official lived, near the synagogue, had been delayed sufficiently so that the daughter who was at the point of death has crossed over. Because Jesus was not there, he could not heal her. And so she's died. And so people come up to Yair and say, it's too late. Don't trouble the teacher, the rabbi, anymore. It's beyond what anybody can do. But Jesus says, knock it off. Don't be afraid. And this is where I camped last week. Do not be afraid any longer. Only believe. One of the great verses in the scripture. Our natural predisposition, I think, whether we're believers, unbelievers, is to be afraid, is to live lives riddled with a certain level of anxiety, certainly stress. But Yeshua breaks through all that noise. And he says, whatever you've been thinking before, whatever your attitude was before, don't be afraid any longer. Only believe. And he ditches the crowd, and he takes his inner circle, James, John, and Peter, and they go with Yair to the house and into the room of the dead girl, and there's the weeping and commotion of the professional mourners, and Yeshua says, knock off the racket. She's only sleeping, not dead. And they ridicule him. They move from professional mourning to professional ridicule. And Jesus says, no time for this. As he takes the dad and the mom, and he takes his disciples and enters the room where the child was. And he said, Talitha kum, little girl, arise. And the little girl got up immediately. And she says, where's my Game Boy? Where's my iPad? No, that was, sorry, I got confused with, she began to walk. She popped out of bed. Now, I don't want you to miss the grammar here. She didn't get up because she was 12 years old. And in fact, it's almost an inartful insertion there. You say, well, what does the fact that she's 12 years old have to do with anything regarding her healing? It actually doesn't have anything to do with her healing at all. It provides the toothpick that goes through the sandwich and holds it all together. Because the woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years has been suffering for exactly the same amount of time that the young girl had been alive. So the very year that the girl had been born, this woman, unrelated, begins to suffer. And they seem to be on two completely separate paths. But they are brought together. There are two separate paths. A 12-year-old girl and a woman suffering for 12 years. Their paths intersect by divine design through Yeshua. And we see the point of the sound is that God is in control. And sometimes you say, Lord God, I've been suffering for 12 years. Why couldn't she be a 10-year-old girl? A 9-year-old girl, right? Why did I have to suffer? Why should I be a 12-year-old girl? Right? This I have no answer for. Nonetheless, the two stories are united. And we have seen now A through I, the authority Yeshua has over. Look at that list. I'm only 5 chapters in a 16-chapter book. I am going to have to go over onto another slide as we move forward. But look at the amount of things that Yeshua has authority over. We have just notably seen that he has authority over death. A lot of the other things seem important, powerful, but where we live, hitting us really in our bread basket, death is really a big one. What good is it if he has authority over Shabbat, but can't conquer death? All right, that's limited, fun, interesting, religious. But death is a big one. So not only demonic powers, not only Shabbat, not only forgiveness of sin, reconciliation between God, disease, death. Well, let's quickly move forward. As I mentioned, God's ways are mysterious. We might not always know why it is that we suffer. But when we suffer, and if you're not, newsflash, if you're not suffering right now, just wait a little while. I've lived long enough to know that if suffering is not at your doorstep today, tomorrow's another day, right? But if Yeshua is our anchor, if he's our rock, if he's our Messiah, very seldom, I find, do we know the why. This person treats me terribly at work because sometimes people are just tough to deal with. Why do I have this illness? Why do I have this disease? I don't know. It's because I didn't eat enough steak? I mean, it has nothing to do with that, right? I should have eaten my broccoli, son of a gun, you know. No, right? Why do family members sometimes bug out and wig out on us? I was a terrible parent? I don't know, maybe you were, but probably that's not the reason, you know. We don't always know the why. We seldom do. But every one of us knows the whom. We may not know why we suffer from the stresses that we are under, but we know who's carrying us through the experience, right? So as Jesus said, don't be afraid any longer. Don't fear the future, only believe. And this introduces, and we're just going to do six verses here. This introduces us to a section that I call rejection. So, having now just recapped last week and the authority we've seen over 5 chapters, and we are after chapter 5. Legions of demons and healing and this raising this girl from the dead. We're on an awesome miracle high, right? The amount of authority that Yeshua has seen over nature, the cosmos, demons, even death itself. We're going to get to this passage, and I got to tell you, there's a bit of deflation along with rejection that we're going to see. Don't take my word for it. Let's see what the text says. Yeshua went out from there, the girl's home and Capernaum, came into his hometown. So from Capernaum he goes to Nazareth. It's not far, in Galilee. And his disciples followed him, a small village of Nazareth. That's what it looks like today. He's been around the crowds and the big town capital of Capernaum, various other places around the Sea of Galilee, the villages. Now he's heading for the hills. Literally, change of scenery. And when Shabbat came, he began to teach in the synagogue. Why did Jesus teach in the synagogue on Shabbat? Because that's what the men of the community had responsibility to do. Yeshua, by this time, his hometown boy, made good. He's got quite a reputation, not just in Nazareth, but in the entire region of Galilee. And is given the honor to teach that morning in the synagogue. There's a lot of people there, packed out that little village synagogue, right? He began to teach in the synagogue. Many listeners were astonished, saying, let's see what they're saying in that synagogue. Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? And such miracles as these performed by his hands. Let's see what they're saying and what they're not saying. What they're not saying, first of all, is this guy's talking nonsense. But how do I know that? Because it says, where is this wisdom coming from? Where did he get this wisdom that has been given to him? Given to him by whom? Socrates? No, by the Lord. Right? His wisdom is off the charts. So they're not saying that he's a charlatan. They're not saying he's a faker. They're not saying that his reputation as a miracle worker is overblown. No, because such miracles as these performed by his hands. They're recognizing the power of his teachings. They're recognizing his greatness. They're actually saying it's not so much a reflection on Jesus, but a reflection on everybody else in Nazareth. And our little backwater, where can anything good come out of Nazareth? How did this guy come out of us? How did this guy spring forth from our little town? How did he get so smart? He didn't study in Jerusalem. He's not a yeshiva bucher. He's not a formal student of the rabbis. He didn't study under Gamaliel like Paul did, or any great rabbi. He's just one of us. He's a hometown boy. Where did he get these things? Is this not the carpenter? The son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Now, by the way, FYI, this translation of carpenter, which we commonly see, it's kind of expected that when we talk about Jesus' profession, that he is labeled as a carpenter, but that limits him just to woodwork. The word behind carpenter, which is tekton, tekton simply means that Yeshua was a craftsman, a builder. You get the term architecton, where we get the word architect. That's a master builder. He's not a master builder, right? He's not an architecton, right? But this is not just a guy building cabinets in his backyard. This is a craftsman. He may have worked with wood. He may have worked with stone. He may have worked with a variety of material to be a craftsman. Carpenter, I think, is limited. Not to denigrate carpenters out there, but I think Yeshua can do that and more. You look at all the people who were there, son of Mary, brother. Why don't they mention Joseph? Don't read too much into that. I think the issue is that Joseph, his father, is dead. Adopted father, is that Joseph is dead by this point. To say that, and also to say the son of Mary and Joseph, in a technical sense, would be inappropriate. Speaking of family, here they are. They are all in the text here. Brothers, James, Joseph, Judas, Simon. They're all Gentile English transliteration of Greek names, the actual Hebrew names behind them, right? Mary is a Miriam. All right, James is Yaakov, Judas is Judah, Simon is Shimon. Joseph is Joseph. Those are the actual names of his brothers and sisters, but we're dealing with a Greek text and an anglicized transliteration of the Greek. So a lot of believers from a variety of different denominations and sects who want to make an issue over the perpetual virginity of Mary. But I got to tell you straight up, that's not the way the text reads. You can read it as Jesus is the son of Mary and the cousin of James and Joseph and Simon and whatever, but there's an actual word for cousin, and that's not the word that's used here. The word that's used here is adelphos. Adelphia, from where we get the word Philadelphia, right, which means what? City of brotherly love, right? It's not the city of cousinly love. It's a city of brotherly love, right? So these are his brothers and his sisters, right? Anyway, they took offense. The word offense, based on the Greek word scandalismo, they're scandalized. They took offense, not in the sense that we think of it today, that you are so rude, Jesus, I'm offended, like, the way millennials and Generation Z are today. But they're actually scandalized that this guy could claim to be all that he is saying and teaching, and he's teaching with such authority beyond his station, and is just a hometown craftsman, just a local yokel among other villagers. Who does he think he is, after all? And Yeshua answers them, a prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown and among his own relatives and in his own household. This is a well-known aphorism used in the first century. Of course, it's a double negative, which makes it a little harder to understand, but it's simply saying that prophets are not honored in their hometown. Prophets have great honor outside of those who know them, but those who know them have a hard time giving them honor. Elsewhere they're honored, but not in the hometown or in our own relatives or in our own household. Traditional joke was told among many pastors, many rabbis, many clergymen in the world that in your world, in your church, in the community, you're respected. Oh, good to see you, Pastor such and such. Oh, wonderful to see you again, Brother Gumball, right? Whatever but when you go home, it's just Dad, right? Years ago, back in the late 80s, 87, so mid-80s maybe, I announced to my friends back home in college, my friends back in high school, that I was going to go to seminary in Dallas. I was going to become a minister. Began with laughter. Really? You? It was one of my old girlfriends. I had connected with her again when I was in college, just for a day in New York. We met in the city, New York. And we're walking down the city block. I hadn't seen her in years, since high school and college. She was at NYU. And walking down the street, New York City. I told her I was going to seminary, enjoying the day. And I'm having this conversation, and here it comes up. We're talking. I mentioned I'm going to seminary, and I'm going to become a minister, become a pastor, and I don't hear anything. So I look over. I'm talking to the air. I look back, and she's half a block down, doubled over in laughter, right? Can't believe and shock, right? The prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown with his own people. That's true. And he could do no miracle there. except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. Wait a minute. Couldn't do a miracle there, but it just told us he did miracles. Look how spoiled we are by the time we get to chapter 6. We're expecting big, giant actions. But nobody was raised from the dead in Nazareth that week. Only a few sick people were healed, which may not seem like a big deal to you, but was a pretty big deal to the sick people whom he healed. And he wondered at their unbelief. And he was going around the villages teaching. When we put these final verses together, the fact that Yeshua is scandalizing people through his teaching and his claims, is it that because they don't, like Tinkerbell, and if you believe, clap your hands, and if enough people don't clap, come on, you at home, if you don't clap your hands, Tinkerbell's not going to revive? You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. Right. I remember as a kid, I was always, counter. So I was a rebel. I'm not clapping my hands, okay? I'm not clapping my hands, okay? She's going to have to get well without me. But is it because they didn't believe that he couldn't do well? Did they sap him of power? Is he like Samson having his hair cut because they don't believe? Is he like Superman and their unbelief is serving like kryptonite and so he cannot bend steel with his bare hands and jump over buildings in a single bound? Matthew says he did no miracle there. Same story. But Mark says he could do, not just that he didn't do, which doesn't put anything, he could do no miracle there. He could do no miracle. While Yeshua had the power to do miracles, obviously, it is important to remember that the miracles were not the message. The miracles only authenticated his message. So if the message is rejected here, then there's no point in doing the miracles. The miracles of Jesus are always secondary to the message of Jesus. If he, as the messenger, is rejected, there's no point in doing the miracles. He looks at his own people from his own hometown, his own family, and he says, my. That's in the original Aramaic. My goodness, the level of unbelief is surprising. I find your level of disbelief to be disturbing. Right? Level of rejection among my own peeps in my own home crib is very disturbing as he leaves and he goes around to the other villages where he is going to be received well. That brings us to our next section, for which I'm going to have to leave you in suspense. Always remember, in closing, that the message is primary. Miracles, healings, exorcisms, revivals from the dead, all of those are secondary. They're authentications to the message. The message is primary. And we see that here in Jesus, with Jesus, and that fact is going to see us through. It's going to be informative for the rest of the gospel message. Let's stand together for the Aaronic benediction.